Data is everywhere. And with it comes infinite power and endless opportunity. For experts, innovators, and disruptors to transform their core operations and shape business outcomes like never before. To offer the world a more compelling and satisfying human experience. And empower the data-driven organization to fuel the new idea economy. The possibilities are as limitless as your imagination. In the right hands, your hands. With big data, you can predict the future, minimize risk, engage your customers, and know your business. Yes, the opportunities of big data are everywhere for those who are ready to harness it. The question is, how will you seize the data? Welcome to the HP Big Data Conference 2015. Seize the data.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Vice President of Marketing for HP Software Big Data, Jeff Veis.
Good morning to you all. And first of all, I want to welcome you to the HP Big Data Conference 2015. This is the event of the year, and we're going to blow you away over the next 3 days. This is an event where the theme you just heard about is seize the data. Now, seize the data is a bold statement, but it's an appropriate one because it's for a bold mission, a mission of how we're going to tap, harness, do things with data to drive innovation to boundaries that we've never seen before, to drive next generation applications and services. And that's what we want to cover. And speaking of data, let's talk about a few data points, right? It's a big data conference, so let's jump in the data already. At this conference, this unique conference, the world's best big data conference, we have over 25 different sponsors that you'll be able to engage and interact with that are part of our ecosystem. There are over 1,000 of you that are participating at this event over the next 3 days. And you're going to see an amazing amount of rich information, over 45 breakout sessions, developer engagement showcases, and other aspects that will allow you to participate and be part of it. And while this event is in Boston, at least they tell me, that's where we are today, it is a global event. Over 22 different countries are represented in this event, giving a sense of how big data is driving innovation across the planet. Now, this isn't just about attending the event. If I had to give you and share a word with you, it's about engagement. That's what makes this event unique. This is about you engaging with each other. It's about you being able to engage with us and also our partners. And one call out I want to make is our Get Social Big Data Wall. If you haven't seen it yet, you'll be blown away. It's in the Solution Showcase area, and you can see the hashtag call it HP Big Data 2015. So get social, participate, engage. This event puts you on the playing field with us, and that's what makes this special. So what I'd like to do is kick off the show and be able to introduce to you our first keynote speaker. And I'd like to ask Robert Youngjohns, Executive Vice President and General Manager of HP Software, to join me on the stage. Welcome, Robert, please.
Well, firstly, welcome and thanks for coming. I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us over the next 2 to 3 days. I want to try and give some sort of position as to where big data fits within the HP strategy. But I guess I want to start by observing that it's not exactly a new phenomena, big data. I've been interested in this subject actually ever since I left college. In fact, my first job out of college, which is more years ago now than I care to remember, involved me doing cluster analysis on data that was streaming out of what was then our enemy, the Warsaw Pact, in an attempt to try and find patterns of activity and things like that. And in fact, even if you predate the computer age, this is one of my favorite examples of a doctor in the 19th century trying to use big data techniques to identify the source of cholera in London. Now, he didn't have Tableau at the time, and he didn't have computers, so his options were, I get a big map of London, and my version of Tableau is a pen, in which I'm going to note on this map, where particular instances of this disease happened. But from that, he was able, and many of you may know this example, to actually find the source of this particular outbreak of cholera and isolate it down to a particular water pump in a particular district of London. So in a sense, throughout time, we've been trying to use data to get a better view of the world. I'm sure Greek astronomers were sitting there looking at the skies, 2,000, 3,000 years ago and saying, if only I had computers to help me work out the motions of these various celestial objects, I'd have a better understanding of the world around us. But what has changed is the vast amount of information that's being created. And I was asked the question yesterday, so when did this happen? And when was the inflection point? And I think it was probably in the last 3 to 5 years, when suddenly the amount of information that almost explodes as a periphery to everything else we do overtook our ability to analyze it, and the tools are now just catching up. And this occurred to me very graphically yesterday, and this is a real instance, a real anecdote. I was actually in Reno, Nevada, for reasons I won't go into. I wasn't gambling, in a car, rental car, with my son and my wife. And I did something wrong on the road. You know how you do, I turned into the wrong lane or something. And I really upset someone in a dark red Corvette. And this dark red Corvette decided to make an issue out of this. So it was diving in and out of the traffic, slamming its brakes on, and eventually it blocked the road in front of me. And I'm now getting really nervous. And what does my son do? Out comes the cell phone. He starts to take a movie. And I thought for a moment, maybe he's calling 911. That would be a smart thing to do. No, he's taking a movie. So if the guy getting out of the car with the gun or whatever, it's an incident, he's going to be able to upload it on YouTube and say, isn't this cool? Get 1 million hits and all that sort of stuff. My wife had the sense at this time to get 911. So eventually, the incident passed with no further activity, because I think that when the guy saw the phones, he thought, one, I'm being videoed, and I think that probably was proud of that, and then secondly, maybe they are calling the police, so I got to get out of here. But the reason for making that anecdote is just the amount of data that was flowing as a result of that. Because I asked afterwards what happened to the movie. Oh, it was automatically uploaded to YouTube. So gigabytes of probably data have flown from that one incident. So everything we do is creating data in vast, vast quantities. Whether it's the applications, the number of people, the number of devices we have attached, they're almost all creating information as an incidental aspect of the way in which they operate. And I think our challenge, and our challenge as an industry, is to help people make sense out of all this information. Whether it's when you access a website, all the security logs that are being created, the clickstream data that's being created, all that video information that's being uploaded. Can we do something to derive value out of that? Do we have the tools that are going to allow us to actually turn this into business value? I watched that movie, Seize the Data, with those fractal graphics emerging all everywhere. Really exciting stuff. But I think in a way, we sort of come to a conclusion that maybe big data is a solution in its own right. And sort of it isn't. Big data is a set of analytic tools that are going to help us make more sense out of all the information that we're creating as almost a byproduct of everything we do every day. And that's an important message to take at heart, because that's the core to the HP strategy. It's about the practical application of analytics to everyday problems, rather than this big fanciful view that somehow there's a big data problem, and if you throw enough data at the big enough Hadoop cluster, somehow an answer is going to come out of it. We all saw Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and the danger is the answer is 42, and you have no idea what the question was. So we're very focused on how do we make this pragmatic, how do we make it real? And it all fits very clearly within the overall HP strategy. So I'm going to spend a moment on this, because many of you will know that HP as a company is splitting into two right now. We're taking one very large computer company and turning it into two very large computer companies. One will be focused on enterprise computing, on servers, software, and infrastructure, and the other will be focused on PCs, printing, and the solutions associated with that. But for the enterprise company, which is where the big data team lives, we're part of the strategy that is really articulated in this slide. And we build it around these four so-called transformation areas. The first is, how do we help our clients transform to what we call a hybrid infrastructure? And what that's about is, how do we allow enterprises to make use of all the new mechanisms of deploying applications and workloads, whether it's public cloud or private cloud or whatever? How do we help make that transition? The second is, how do we help our clients protect what is becoming increasingly a digital exercise? And we've got a unique point of view on this, because we believe that security within the enterprise is really going to center on three major topics. Firstly, it's becoming a big data problem. The analysis of log files, the derivation of value out of log files is becoming a massive big data problem for enterprises. I was reviewing one of our own SaaS applications towards the end of last week, and they told me enthusiastically they created over 40,000 log files with an average size of about 100 megabytes. And I'm going, so what are you actually doing with all these log files? There's a big pause around the table. Well, from time to time we look at them. That's not a helpful solution. You really want to be able to use this as a way of finding out what's going on, who's attacking, so you can get at intruders long before they do damage to the enterprise. We've got one of those gee whiz statistics that says, on average, it's over 200 days before you notice that someone's actually intruded into your enterprise network. It's only at that point, but it could have done 200 days worth of damage. And you almost certainly, within the log files and all the information you have about the interaction of users with your systems, knew about it earlier if only you had the tools. So we see that as one of the defining aspects of how you protect your enterprise, your digital enterprise in the future. And we add to that hardening applications and making much widespread use of encryption. The third transformation area, which is where really this conference plays, is about how you empower a data-driven organization. And I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about what that looks like and what tools we have to allow that to happen. But it's really all about the practical application of analytics to drive better decisions day to day, and making sure we have the tools to do that. And the fourth transformation area we're working on, this new company, we call enabling a more productive workforce. And this isn't really, when I first saw this, I said, does that mean we're going to get into Excel and spreadsheets and things like that? No, it doesn't. But what it does mean is we're going to provide the tooling, the infrastructure to allow employees to more seamlessly connect to networks, be more active both inside the workplace and outside the workplace in the way in which they can collaborate, they can use mobile apps and so on. And as some of you may be aware, we acquired a company recently called Aruba that is really core to making that happen. It provides networking, wireless infrastructure to make that happen. So this really is what the strategy of the future Hewlett Packard Enterprise company will be founded on. And data is a critical component of that, and that's what this conference is really all about. So we think we've got a unique strategy. I think the first thing is we believe, as I've said before, you need to be able to apply analytics everywhere. I have a phrase I've used a lot, which is big data changes everything. And what I mean by that phrase is it's the way you apply analytics to almost everything you do that's going to define this industry, not how you create some sort of entity called big data and assume it's going to solve big problems by itself. This is about solving the everyday problems, whether it's having better security, better operations management with your enterprise, better control of stock levels, better interaction with your customers. It's about applying analytics to every single one of those problems in a very pragmatic way. It's also about making sure you can support all the data that exists within the enterprise. Data isn't just structured. When I've talked about data before, I've talked about the three forms of data. The machine data, which is often the information that flows out of sensors, it flows out of click streams, it flows out of log files. Highly structured, vast in quantity. Then there's human information. There's the information that we create with those videos, those audio files that we create, emails, texts, and so on. And then there's traditional business information, your sort of ERP system, your customer management system. Whatever tools you have to support all of those data types and look at them as equal systems. And many vendors in this space don't approach it that way. They approach it with, hey, I have a great data warehouse, and I can extend my data warehouse outwards using traditional technologies into these additional data types. We don't take that approach. We start with, we need to be able to support 100% of your data. We also embrace open source. You know, we see a huge amount of innovation going on in the open source movement. Our view is that we want to work with it, we want to empower it, we want to contribute to it. And you're going to see great examples over the next couple of days about how we exactly plan to do that. And this can be quite hard to keep up with. I was actually in Palo Alto in our sort of central enclave of the executive committee just a few days ago when my boss was walking around saying, hey, I just had a conversation with this VC who told me Hadoop's dead, and now it's Spark. And I was teasing her about 3 days later going, hey, Meg, I just heard Spark's dead, and now it's, and I made up a name at that point, and I think she saw me teasing her. But, you know, keeping up here is really, really tough. We were joking about we want to be in the business of creating open source names because it's a lot of fun. You know, Kafka. I wonder if the people who create Kafka ever really read a Kafka novel and work out how sinister it really is. And do you really want to name your sort of messaging queuing system after an author that wrote books like that? But never mind. There's lots and lots of examples about that. And lastly, and really importantly, we've got to be in the business of empowering developers. You know, we've thought a lot about, do we go to the market with just big data solutions? Or do we become an enabler for an industry that allows developers to create their solutions for this industry? And you can imagine we chose very strongly, we want to be about developers, because we think developers are absolutely key to unlocking value within this whole industry. This is just an example, actually. It's not particular to big data, but it's an application we created recently for the Apple iWatch, which actually then connects back to our service manager platform and allows people to actually look at what's going on within an enterprise from an app. What I like about this is not so much the app itself, but some of the infrastructure we built behind to enable this app. One problem with apps is trying to make sure that actually the user experience is a good experience. And we've built some really interesting software to allow that to happen. We call it App Pulse Mobile, and essentially it's a telemetry system that sits between the app and the system that serves the app. And it allows you to collect information on all the interactions the user's having with the app, and then making conclusions for that about how you write better apps going forward. Now you might think, what's this got to do with big data? It's actually got a lot to do with big data, because the amount of information that's coming out of this telemetry system is just phenomenal. You know, we're measuring every touch, every swipe, every interaction, and then we're trying to, across maybe millions of users, and then trying to derive that back into how do you get a one-shot view of what the user experience is like. And we've had some great examples. One of my favorites was when we were analyzing a customer application and looking as to why their star rating in the App Store was so low. And a lot of the comments were by the response time's terrible, the response time's erratic, and they didn't quite know why. And with App Pulse Mobile, we were able to do some very deep analytics and find actually it resulted on a very simple cause. This particular app spent time waiting for an advertisement to get served. So at some point in the code, the developer had said, okay, now we need to make some money out of this app, so I need to serve an advertisement, and then I'll get 5 cents or whatever it is for placing the ad in the advertisement. The ad server was pretty erratic, and sometimes the app would have to wait for maybe 2, 3, 4 seconds for the ad to get served. And so the user experience, they didn't know that. They just thought this app doesn't work. Really simple fix. You just put a timer in there. If the ad is not served within 15 microseconds, move on. And by doing that, they change the whole user perception of the app. So maybe a little bit far-fetched as a big data conference, but it's an example of how the world of developer and big data actually come together. Now, to do all this well, you've got to build a platform. And you're going to hear a lot about this over the next couple of days, because this is what we're setting out to do. We're setting out to provide a platform that not only we can use ourselves to create great HP solutions, like the one I just talked about, App Mobile. There are lots of others in that category. Operations analytics, which helps people look at all the log files that are created in data center management and start to do predictive work on whether a system is likely to fail or not. Predictive application lifecycle management, a phenomenal solution we're working on that takes all the data that's created in the DevOps lifecycle and uses it to try to predict whether an application will succeed or fail in production. You know, real breakthrough thinking from our lab in your hood, and incredibly effective. The statistics on the ability of this application, this predictive application lifecycle management, to tell whether an application, a workload will succeed in production is just phenomenal, almost scary accurate. Now, the idea of it is you then turn around, of course, and make the changes that stop the application failing in production. And that's the purpose of it. But a great example of using predictive analytics in a place that people weren't thinking of doing it before. In the world of security, I already talked about making better use of log files. We have a Protect conference coming up in 3 weeks' time. We're going to announce some new software there that takes the use of analytics to a completely new scale in terms of how you identify intrusion and damage within your network, without having to put software on devices, without traditional firewalls, by just looking at the pattern of interaction of network requests. You know, we can use predictive analytics to determine whether a network or a device has been infected and take the proactive action to then isolate it and cure it. Something that people have thought about a lot conceptually. I mean, conceptually, if your laptop starts talking to a website in North Korea or Novosibirsk, you've probably been infected. But doing that on a mass scale across millions of devices with billions of DNS calls is a real big data problem. So a platform, we're using it extensively internally in HP to create better applications to solve specific customer solutions. We're also working with this platform with individual customers. And the great news, every one of these individual customers is represented here today that's on the slide, and they'll be talking about their experience of how they built solutions that transform their solutions with our big data platform. And finally, we're making it available to the broader developer community. We've run a series of hackathons around our platform over recent weeks. I'm really encouraged by the interest we're getting. We had a hackathon in our Sunnyvale office just a couple of weeks ago, and the best news to me is we were turning people away because the fire wardens were saying we'd exceeded the capacity of the building. The number of people who wanted to come, developers who wanted to come use our big data platform, our cloud solution to build the next generation of applications. And to do all this well, you've got to have a platform. You've got to provide data connectors, you've got to provide analytics, context, categorization, and you've got to expose it through a series of programming interfaces. And sort of we acknowledge the world sits in a world of REST APIs and SQL, and you've got to support both those sorts of worlds with a developer toolkit and an ability to access these across the web with websites such as idleondemand.com. So we think the platform we're building out is unique, it's differentiated, and it's orientated towards the developer, someone who wants to go and create code. And we're trying it out and using it aggressively ourselves for our own generation of application. I also talked about Hadoop. And one of the things that we're also very much more focused on today than perhaps we were 2 years ago is helping our customers unleash the full potential of what they've been doing with Hadoop. I meet a lot of customers and I say to them, what's your big data strategy? And they come back and they say, Hadoop. And I go, well, that's great. That's a technology. What's your strategy? And they look a little confused and say, it's Hadoop. We've got all these proof of concepts running. We've got some fun graphs we can show you. That's always a good sign to me or a bad sign, depending on your perspective. We've got this wonderful Tableau, rotating three-dimensional graph that grows out from the side and all that sort of stuff. And you go, wow, that's really exciting, but what's your strategy? So we're hoping and working with customers to help them get better value out of these Hadoop implementations. Whether it's getting better performance in less space with our hardware configurations, whether it's adding Vertica and other tools alongside to actually get at more data types at much, much higher speeds, and also to be able to protect and govern those. And the reason I say this is some people say, well, Vertica, Hadoop, are they separate things? We see them as completely complementary. And as I talked about earlier, you're going to see a lot in this conference about how we work with the open source community to help enable and unlock the power of the solutions that they have. So I believe honestly that HP, particularly in HP's new incarnation as the HP Enterprise company, is the partner for all of you, all of our customers, to transform the way they think about the business, the way they think about information technology. We're building it around these 4 transformation areas. You're going to hear a lot more about them. We first talked about these at our Discover conference in Vegas, and I think it's fair to say there was a bunch of cynicism in the audience about whether they'd last beyond Discover, because you know how marketing events are. Sometimes it comes up, a lot of fuss, and then it evaporates. This will persist. We are building entire practices around this worldview. And the really important thing for this conference is data is one of these core transformation areas for us. We think it matters, we think it makes a difference, and we think we're uniquely positioned to work with you to make better value out of all the information that's created within the enterprise. So once again, I thank you for coming to this conference. I really appreciate your time. I hope you find the next 2 to 3 days really, really useful. And if you've got questions, things that you'd like to talk to me personally about, don't hesitate to email me. It's robert.youngjohns@hp.com. Relatively straightforward to remember. I'm very happy. I typically try to respond to my emails probably more quickly than most people think is possible, but there it goes. But with that, I'd like to now introduce the Senior Vice President for the Big Data Business and my colleague, Colin Mahony. Colin.
Welcome. It's hard to believe it's our 3rd year here. It's great to see so many familiar faces. Great to see a lot of new faces here in the audience. Welcome again to Boston, and a special thanks to all of our sponsors who help us make this happen. It's still a really exciting time for big data. I was actually thinking about this experience recently. Not too long ago, back in 2012, we had been acquired by HP as Vertica, and I was going into a meeting with a Korean company, and I don't speak Korean. This group didn't speak much English, so we had a translator. And up until this point, we actually made a conscious decision not to use the words big data in any of our materials. We thought big data was out there, sure. We have a real solution in big data, we have real customers, but there's so much hype around big data that maybe it doesn't make sense for us to go down that path. So I go into this meeting, and I give my presentation. And then after the presentation, there was a time for QA. And so I don't understand Korean, but every 10th and 11th word that this Korean party was saying was big data. They'd speak Korean and then big data. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, wow, I just presented for 30 or 40 minutes. I didn't use those words once in this slide deck, and they clearly are interested in big data. So after that, I, of course, ran back, and I said to the team, we really need to put big data into our slides because it's real, it's happening, and even though there are so many questions about big data, as Robert alluded to, and in some cases people equate it with Hadoop, it's a global thing. It's not just the Americas, it's all over the world. People are interested in it. This is Google Trends view of big data. The dotted lines are what they're projecting. Maybe a little bit of a dip, but I think overall we're going to keep going up. There's a lot of interest in big data, and consequently there's also a lot of interest in Hadoop. You've probably seen this before from Facebook. I know we've talked about it here in years past. It's a really cool, I call it a piece of art, but it started just as a black screen with no pixels on it. White dots represent Facebook friends in the world, and the lines represent friendships, connections. And ultimately what it did, of course, is it drew a map of the world. And this is a very good example of how you can take a lot of data. By the way, it's probably updating in real time right now, but you can take a lot of data and really step back and see some important trends, like where do we not have that many people online in the world. But this also points out something really interesting that we deal with every day, which is where is the impact? Robert said it's not just big data for big data's sake. People actually want to use big data to get something done, something in their business done. And so we ask ourselves, where is the impact? Here we are, years later, big data's been around. What have we done with big data? How have we changed the world? How have we made businesses better, humans better? Well, it turns out that most of you in this room, I think, have made a huge impact with data. We have customers, especially in what we represent as the idea economy. And you can see how data really does change everything, as Robert said. It has such a profound impact. Yesterday I was talking to Toby We were talking to her from New York Genome Institute, and she was telling us a story of how a young child basically was not able to store any of the nutrients that he was eating, and he was dying, and nobody could figure out what was going on, except the University of Wisconsin actually figured it out with genomics data and some other data, exactly what was going on. It turns out all this child needed was to change his diet, and then it stopped. Information can do so many things to us as people, whether it's a gaming experience, whether it's a medical experience, whether it's an annoying online ad or a not so annoying online ad. That personalization that we've talked about in the past, treating me as an individual of one, is so critical. And information and data is what allows that to happen. But again, we always have to focus on what are we trying to do? Because just looking at the data for data's sake will do very little to move that forward. The impact of the information is what's most important. You know, I've never gone into a customer environment and had customers tell me, I have 1,000 servers because I love putting data on those servers, managing those servers, moving that data around. Some people think that's fun, and I'm sure it is on certain days, but that's not why they do it. They don't do it just to move the data around. They do it for an ultimate goal. In fact, some organizations now have gone so far as given teams a certain amount of time, and if they can't do anything with the data, they take it away, and they put it somewhere else. And that is actually fostering some really interesting innovation coming out of companies, forcing them to sort of use it or lose it. And ultimately, we hope they're not really losing it. They're putting it into some place where it's cost-effective to store, but they could go back to the full detail of all the information and figure out what happened. The people that care about information now, I think we all understand. You know, in this room, we're probably pretty high up on the chart of people who understand data and how to drive businesses with data. But there's a lot of other people out there that were not trained this way, but they rely on information and data. Whether it's regulatory and compliance reasons, you're a business analyst, you're a statistician, also known as a data scientist. Whether you're just someone that is developing applications, data is now so core to every application that you develop. And what we're seeing is the organizations that are able to pull this together and make a huge impact are the organizations that are able to pull these different groups of people together from beginning to end with their data challenges and solve a specific problem. We believe that if you look back when some of the first relational database technology came out, you had a lot of custom applications. Then you saw ERP and CRM and HR software come out. So packaging up some of those applications, because a lot of the things that people had to do, whether it was closing their books or managing their talent or looking at customers and the relationships, a lot of those things were very standard. But actually what we're starting to see again is that there's this huge crop and need of applications that are in many ways custom again. They work with ERP, they work with CRM, they work with a lot of the systems that we have, and those systems are critically important, but there's a lot of new application areas where, frankly, there's probably never going to be a perfect packaged application. But the use of data, mashing up the information, bringing your CRM together with, say, log data off the wire or off the website, combining those types of information and customizing them not only for your company, but for your individual constituent customer is really important. And we see a renaissance happening right now. When we talk to our customers and we find out how they've deployed our platform, how they're using our applications, ultimately there's always an app use case. And the most important thing for them is, how do I get this application up and running very quickly? The days of 18 to 24 month enterprise data warehouse deployments where you spend a lot of money and a lot of time goes by and you can't figure out if it mattered, those are gone. They'll never be back, nor should they. The days of let's spin something up quickly, let's see what impact it can have on this organization and the business, let's make it matter, and then reinvest and build on it, that's the world we live in today. And everything about what's going on in the technology industry, especially big data, reflects that. So this is interesting. You know, the big data and Hadoop are still there, SQL is the yellow. Apps are the green. And of course, you can read a whole bunch of things into this. Of course, there's more searches on Google for apps, right? Because of iPhones and devices. We're all looking for apps. But I like looking at this also because it shows you just how large some of these greater trends are. And really what people care about is that end application, right? Developers obviously probably care about SQL, but as Robert said, they also care a lot about REST APIs, or they care a lot about doing other types of analytics and searches. You have to look at this in the context of what people want to do. And one of the best things about apps, especially with mobility, and I think Robert gave one of the best examples with the new iWatch, is that they're all about getting a job done where you're doing your job. And that's the way people are looking at analytics. How can you embed analytics into the role that I play in my organization so it's there when I need it? And our job is to help developers be able to do that much easier, much more simply across the whole portfolio. The app trends are going to continue. They're not going to stop. But what they all need is power from a platform and the ability to spin up these composite apps really quickly. This is an example with our partner Logi that was spun up very quickly as a voice of the customer app. In fact, you can see a lot of these demos on the show floor. We have customers actually using this and talking about it today. We actually spun up one of our own apps just to monitor the social media activity here, and we were able to customize it exactly the way we wanted to customize it for our business and for this particular show. That's the type of thing you need to be able to do in the business. Be able to spin something up quickly, look at the data types that you care about, whether it's structured, it's unstructured, it's semi-structured, but pull that information together, start seeing correlations, and take action on it. And next week, it could look completely different. So again, that notion of a pure packaged app won't really apply. It will certainly continue, but you've got to augment it with some of the other things that you can do. Robert talked about our broader platform, right? Talked about Kafka, talked about Hadoop. This ecosystem, there are so many different technologies out there. It's incredibly confusing. And there is always sort of a flavor of the week. Is it Orc? Is it Parquet? Is it Spark? Is it Hadoop? Who knows? And we won't really know. Nobody can pick that trend in advance. But our job is actually to embrace the best of breed that we can, incorporate a lot of these open source technologies into what we do, and also contribute back. You'll probably hear today that we contributed our Flex Zone to open source. We've contributed some of our Hadoop technologies to make it easier for Vertica to run on Hadoop and read information faster back to open source. There's a lot of initiatives now where we're contributing back to the community, whether it's Kafka, whether it's Hadoop, whether it's something that we're doing in our database itself, because we do believe in that. HP has always been a very open standards company, and we want to continue that. So no matter what new technologies come out, our job is to maintain that relevance and make it really easy for developers especially, and business analysts, to pull the pieces that they need, because ultimately, especially the business analysts, they don't really care about the platform. They care about how they consume it. And we do that on-premise. We do that in the cloud, on demand, private cloud or public cloud, which we're also entirely committed to doing. So we've got to continue to invest in our best-of-breed capabilities, our true norths, the areas like IDLE for unstructured or Vertica for structured and log that we know differentiate us more than anyone else. But at the same time, embrace all these other technologies so that we can build for you into your environment exactly what you need. Here's a couple of them I already mentioned, and if I threw this up next week, it might be something else. We're also careful. I mean, we're not just jumping in and leveraging every flavor of the week. We do our testing, we do our benchmarking, we talk to customers, we ask them, what are you most interested in? So there's a whole process that we're looking at. Obviously, we have limited resources as well, but taking that feedback and continually reinvesting in our portfolio to be relevant is really important. We fully believe in that process of innovation. We fully believe in that crowdsourcing model. but we also believe that we've got to harden our products. We've got real organizations, large organizations, not always organizations with lots of developers who can tweak the code themselves, and we've got to balance that, which is exactly what we're doing. So I think you're going to have a great couple days here. We've got some fascinating speakers both today as well as these two tomorrow. Ken Rudin from Facebook, who is also our customer at Zynga. We've got Nate Silver. If some of you may remember some of the work that the Democratic National Committee did with the Vertica platform back in the 2012 presidential election. We charge per terabyte there. With the Republicans, we're actually thinking about charging per candidate this year. We haven't figured that out yet. So it's going to be a great show. And I really encourage you, as Jeff said in the beginning, go out to the sessions. Some of the feedback that we've gotten in the past was we want more technical. So what we did was every single one of these sessions is embedded with lots of technical. But to the extent that it also has a sort of business track to it, which hopefully most of them do, we've tagged it. So in the database world, I guess from a catalog standpoint, we've lost a little bit of referential integrity in our sessions, but we've actually tagged them with lots of different content for you to take. So encourage you to get out there and see the sessions. The other thing that you're going to hear a lot about today in a press release that went out, as well as in some of the sessions and after from the team, from Shilpa and Chris, is our Startup Accelerator program. It is in our DNA. I was a startup guy. HP, way back, Dave and Bill were startup guys in their garage, and we really believe in fostering innovation around us in the community, building up that marketplace, helping to fund companies, getting them our software at very reasonable rates while they're in those early years. So you're going to hear a lot about that, and as a matter of fact, I'm especially excited to introduce a very special person, not only in this room, but most recently, Mike Stonebreaker won the Turing Award, which not only gave him $1 million, but it is one of the most prestigious awards, the most prestigious computer science award for his contribution to computer science and especially database systems. Mike is an incredible guy. I'm going to do a Q&A session with him right now. On a personal level, Mike was one of the key people that convinced me to leave the dark side of venture capital and join Vertica in the early days. So with that, I would love to welcome Mike Stonebreaker up to the stage. Have a seat. All right, so this is pretty informal Q&A, but one of the first things that
you've gone back over to the dark side, by the way. You now wear
well,
the suit.
It's a dark suit. It's a dark suit. Not always, though. Not always.
You can always tell the executive. He's the guy who has to wear a suit. Techies never wear suits.
It's true. I'm still pretty techie, though. Don't let the suit confuse you.
By the way, I was responsible for hiring Colin way back when at Vertica, and he actually tells stories about.
Oh, many stories. So I got involved with Vertica from the very beginning when I was at Bessemer. At the time, we were calling the company Stonebreaker Systems, and I visited Mike at his MIT office. We were talking about the whole thing, and I would waffle back and forth, and I actually had a database background, and I love this idea. And actually, my wife would tell me, like, I seem miserable at work, yet every time I went and spent time with Stonebreaker Systems, I seemed to light up. And every time I would see Mike, he basically, the first thing he would say, and you can tell he's a pretty direct guy, is, why are you still a venture capitalist? And then finally, at the right moment, between him and Andy doing the same thing, it was all over. But I'm a lot less interesting than you, so let's talk about you. So you've been around since the beginning. What are some of the things, even back to the Ingress and Postgres days? I mean, how have some of these innovations disrupted the market and really changed where we are?
Well, I think I apologize to the audience for being a shill for HP at the moment. But I think the most disruptive thing that I ever did was do column stores. Because I think until until the mid-2000s, all the data warehouse products were row stores, and the introduction of Vertica, which was a column store, has basically completely transformed the data warehouse market. Anyone who's going to survive either has moved to be a column store or is in the process of moving to be a column store. So the data warehouse market has moved from a row store to a column store. I think it was entirely Vertica doing it. It wasn't that Vertica invented column stores. They had been around for quite a while previously, but I think Vertica challenged the then incumbents and caused the entire industry to move from a row store to a column store. So I think that's probably the most disruptive thing I've done.
So what do you look out there, big data is all the rage now. You've been around it for longer than anyone. What do you think about what's going on right now? What do you see as the opportunity here?
Well, I'm delighted that Jeff or some other marketing guy told me what I've been doing for 40 years. So I've been doing big data forever, and the marketing buzz is completely meaningless. So let me tell you what I think big data means. and I view it as three words which start with V, which is you've got a big data problem if you have a volume problem. So that's the first V. You've got too much data. And I'll come back to that in a second and decompose it. The second, you've got a big data problem if you've got a velocity problem, which is the data is coming at you too fast and you can't keep up. So that's the second V. And the third V is you've got a big data problem if it's coming at you from too many places and you've got a variety problem. So those are the three Vs to me. So the first V, if you've got a volume problem, if you want to do SQL analytics on petabytes of data, Vertica's happy to do it. Zynga was mentioned. Zynga's in production on 5 petabytes or so of data on gigantic cluster. So I view that as a solved problem. And Vertica and others can manage your big volume problem if all you want to do is SQL. But I think the thing that I think is most interesting was Colin mentioned data science. So in my opinion, business analysts who want to do SQL-like stuff on lots of data are going to give way to data scientists. And data science is about much more sophisticated analysis, predictive modeling, regressions, Bayesian classification, ... That stuff at scale doesn't work very well on anybody's engine right now. And so I think if you want to do complex analytics on big data, you've got a big problem these days. And I think that's something for the industry in general to solve. SAR was mentioned earlier. People who do this like to code in R, like to code in MATLAB. And doing scalable R, scalable MATLAB, I think is an interesting challenge. If you've got a big velocity problem, Kafka was mentioned. Kafka is not transactional. So I think upstream from essentially any Vertica data warehouse is a velocity problem of some sort. The Internet of Things is going to make that much, much, much worse. So I think, check out Kafka, check out Storm, check out some of the new SQL engines that are very high performance OLTP systems, things like MemSQL, things like VoltDB. So I think velocity is a challenge all of you are going to get if you haven't gotten it already. And integrating upstream and downstream systems, I think, is going to be a key challenge for the large vendors. The 800-pound gorilla in the corner is that you're getting data from too many places, and you've got a data integration problem. And essentially everybody on the planet wants to integrate more and more and more data sources. The easy way to think about this is you divide into business units so that you can get stuff done. Business units create silos. The average large enterprise has 5,000 operational data systems. A big enterprise like Verizon has 10,000. You get 20 of them into your Vertica data warehouse. What about the other 4,980? Those are simply siloed and not accessible. And putting together independently constructed data sources into a composite whole at scale is something that the extract, transform, and load vendors won't do and are not ever going to do. So as Colin mentioned Tamer. So I started a company that tries to do data integration at scale. The goal is to be as disruptive as possible to the existing traditional ETL vendors with a completely new way of doing things. So they're here in the showcase, so check them out.
Yeah, and this is one of the companies that HP invested in as part of the investment program, startup program.
Do it some more.
Yeah, we will. I mean, that's the plan. That's absolutely the plan.
Now, I think that's a great way for HP to become way more nimble.
Yeah.
Because I think you mentioned earlier that business success will come to the nimble. So it's all about being agile. So get agile. Everybody should get agile.
What are some of the things that have surprised you the most over the years?
How much you guys all listen to and believe the marketing hype. So let me start with 4 years ago, the marketing hype was MapReduce is the answer. And MapReduce, by the way, was a particular system that Google built, purpose-built to support their crawl database. It was built in 2005. Google abandoned it for the purpose for which it was written in 2011, I think. And you guys all said, my God, Google thinks this is great. This is our strategy. And of course, Google has to be laughing in their beer for convincing everybody that what they just discarded was a good idea. So then, so MapReduce basically dropped by the wayside, and the Hadoop vendors pivoted immediately to saying, well, MapReduce is this little thing off in the corner. So the answer is we're going to rebrand Hadoop to mean something completely different than it used to mean. So it really means HDFS, which is a file system. So the platform that Hadoop means is a file system. And so that was, sort of the second point of view. What quickly happened was that what people really wanted out of quote Hadoop end quote was a data warehouse system. So Cloudera is now selling Impala. In fact, Spark, the statistics on Spark is 80% of the Spark accesses are Spark SQL. So Spark is a data warehouse market. And I think Spark is on version 1, Impala is on version 2, Vertica is on version 6 or 8. And so I think this is all a data warehouse market. So I think the new pivot is to say, well, if it's a data warehouse market, then what value is HDFS? Vertica has a new product, just puts its engine on top of HDFS. It's not hard at all to do. SQL on Hadoop, I think you call it. It's really SQL on it's really Vertica on HDFS. So that was sort of market positioning number 2. So you all believe that. So then what are the Hadoop vendors the HDFS vendors going to sell? Well, now they're selling data lakes. So that's the new buzz. And you've now all bought that story. What is a data lake? The idea is put all of your files into some common place. Call it your junk drawer. And then once you figure out what you need out of your junk drawer, you'll curate it. That requires something like Data Tamer, and that is a lot of work. And then you're going to load it into something like Vertica. So how much money are you willing to pay for a junk drawer? I mean, the answer is not very much. So you've all believed the succession of hype. And as Colin aptly pointed out, the hype slide that he will give you in 2 weeks may well be different than what you just saw. So you guys should all be way, way more cynical.
I'm having a flashback to one of our first sales meetings where somebody was explaining MapReduce to Mike, and Mike just sort of looked at him stoically, and he said, you know, I've heard of that before. It's called group buy. Well, so maybe lastly, you know, you've given me some great advice, and given all the hype and given some of the things that we've talked about, what advice would you give everyone in this room?
Oh, I think, you know, you heard Jeff and Colin talk about analytics. Analytics are going to move to complex analytics. And you're not going to morph from being a business analyst to being a data scientist. That's all about statistics. It's all about machine learning. Learn about array database systems. Get out a statistics book. You know, figure out what naive Bayes models mean. So get smart on data science, because that's what analytics is going to turn into. It may take a decade because there aren't enough trained data scientists. Every university is trying to spin up a data science program. That's clearly going to be the future. And so if you're a business analyst and you're doing SQL stuff, figure out how to retread yourself into a data scientist.
Great. Mike Stonebreaker, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff.
Well, was that great? Another round of applause. Was that good? This is not an ordinary conference, okay? You get it real, you get it unplugged. Apparently, I'm the marketing guy. And you should be skeptical of everything I say for the rest of the conference. I'll be putting my resume out really soon. So if you'd like to meet me after the conference, I'll be very open to consider other opportunities. No, but seriously, that kind of exchange, I think, brings what makes this conference real. And that's what we want to do. And in fact, right now, what I'd like to do to peel the proverbial onion and discuss about what we're doing at HP around big data is invite up two of our prominent executives, Shilpa and Chris. If you could please join me on the stage. Please give them a welcome. Thank you very much. Are these the coolest T-shirts that you've ever seen, huh? That's marketing right there.
Not on the dark side.
It's also putting to rest all those silly rumors about HP having a dress code, which was buzzing around the news. Some of you may have heard about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Obviously, we threw that policy out the window right away. Well, I'm excited to have these two executives join me on the stage, and we're going to chat. We're going to chat about what we're doing, not just what, but why. We're going to be chatting about the vision that we have, but also what we're announcing. Just within the last half hour around the globe, we had a corporate global press release where we announced news. You guys are going to be the first that are going to get it direct and hear about things that we've announced just today. So without further ado, Shilpa, a lot of the people in the audience I hear use this product called Vertica. And my understanding is we have a new arrival that we have just announced to the world. So I would love to talk about that. And tell us, what's the big news with Vertica?
So after Mike just said that, Vertica is a solved problem, I wonder what can make news, right? But I told Jeff when he said Mike should be on stage that he cannot control what Mike says, so that's what you get. So,
she was right. She was right.
So what are we doing with Excavator? So really our aim is with Excavator, the theme you'll see throughout this conference really is bringing together, innovations that we have, including Vertica, IDLE, and so on, and bringing that together with some of the key leading innovations we see in the open source ecosystem, and trying to bring them together to really, I would say, bridge the gap between sort of the traditional data processing paradigms like the enterprise data warehouses and sort of the new age paradigms like data lakes, and trying to marry these two worlds. And so along in that vein, as part of Excavator release, we are doing some very interesting new integrations. So one of the things that we are doing is an integration with Apache Kafka. And the reason for doing that is that, Vertica has always been really fast at loading lots of data. We had, I think last year at the conference, Facebook presented how they could load 35 terabytes an hour into Vertica. But it's always been, a challenge for people to do that. It's always starting from scratch and doing that. So we've just made that process extremely simple now, so anybody can just plug that data into Kafka, and on the other side, you can put it into Vertica. We've taken care of all the elements of scale and exactly one's delivery and all those things for you. So another area that we've been investing for the past couple of years is bringing the world of text search to the world of structured data. So a lot of data that people think of as unstructured, log data and things like that, are really not really unstructured. It's very much semi-structured, structured. There's a lot of structure in that data. It just needs to be extracted. But at the same time, there are very powerful ways of querying the data when you don't really know what the structure is or don't want to know what the structure is, and that's search. And so one of the things we've been doing is allow just for plain free text search for data that is already stored in Vertica for analytics. And so we've done a lot of work in this release to further that initiative. And then the third thing I'll highlight is what Mike mentioned earlier, which is SQL and Hadoop. And I think contrary to what Mike said, it's not as easy to do because otherwise the open source community would have done it already. But what we've really done is taken the robust SQL engine that we've had, that we've invested almost a decade in building, bringing that same robustness and expansive SQL capability to Hadoop. So now you can essentially take all of the BI dashboards and the queries that you are all familiar with doing on your traditional database. You can also do that on data that is stored in HDFS. The thing that we've done that is unique is that we don't actually force you to put the data into Vertica, into our Vertica data format. We just leverage an open source format called org files. We worked with our partner Hortonworks to really optimize, take some of the IP from Vertica's core engine and adapt it to work on this open format. So what that means is that you can not just run Vertica on this data, but you can also run other applications on the same data. And so that's, I think, truly unique in the industry. And throughout this conference, you'll see lots of breakout sessions, which talk a lot more about what we've done with Excavator. Predictive analytics is another big area. So I can keep going on, but I'll let Jeff.
Well, it certainly sounds like we've put a lot of capabilities in, but what I'm also hearing is maybe our approach has evolved and expanded a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about, for example, the work we did with Hortonworks, right? Where, the world used to be, not too far back, it was black and white, open source and not, right? And one was replacing the other. And it's more of a shades of gray kind of situation. And when we talk about open source, what comes to mind? Are we contributing it? Are we using it? Is it one size fits all? When we're thinking of a product like Vertica and then swimming in the open source kind of data lake, if you will, to use a favorite term, what are we thinking about?
Yeah, so we believe that even more important than open source is open access. So you will see that all of the products that we have, some of the innovations where we believe that the open source community can really contribute, benefit, and augment our technology, we have been open sourcing. Flex tables is an example of that. The work that we've done for SQL and Hadoop with the org files, that's contributed back to the Apache Hadoop project. Distributed R, which is our predictive analytics engine, which actually is technology that was developed by HP Labs to scale R. This is an entirely open source product. We've had 1,600 downloads since we released it earlier this year. And we are hoping that we are working with our community, the R core community, to help make some of the innovations that are in that product to be available as part of standard R. And so it's okay if people don't want to use our implementation of distributed R, but they want to use an open source implementation of distributed R. So, we believe there's a lot of different ways that we are trying to sort of embrace and further the technology, state of technology of big data. And we believe that key to all of that is also open access. So all of our products are available for downloads. We have APIs that you can use forever and without paying for them. So we have the Vertica Community Edition, a terabyte of data free for use forever.
Okay. And in fact, you touched on one last thing that I'd like to touch on, which is on demand. Yeah. And you know, it used to be cloud was everything, right? And it's still certainly out there. And when a lot of people bring up this idea of on-demand or cloud, it seems to mean a lot of different things. When we're thinking about on-demand, what things are coming to mind and what is driving our strategy when we bring that aspect into our thinking? Because I know that's been part of our innovations.
Yeah. So one of the things that has changed over the past few years is that a few years back, when you talked about on-demand, people associated it with like public cloud, right? So, and cloud is a very key, I would say, another evolving area of technology. But now, 3 years later, I think on-demand is more like a way of life. It is this thing that Colin talked about of like constantly evolving, elastic applications, things that can very quickly be delivered without a lot of lead times and things like that. That's all to us on demand. So some of the investments you'll see us make and announcements and demos you'll see here are about making small pieces of our platform functionality available through on-demand APIs, as REST APIs, as well as making it easy to build these data-rich applications with these APIs.
Okay, and people are going to be able to see a lot about that at this conference, right? We are opening the kimono and showing how we're embracing on demand.
And we'd love to invite developers to participate and help us make these APIs better, give us feedback, and build interesting applications that haven't been built before.
Okay, well let's build on that. The next thing I'd like to go to is Colin talked about this concept of composite analytical applications. Maybe something like a marketing guy came up with, possibly. So let's talk about composite analytical apps. And I know a big focus for us, and even Michael talked about, is making this simpler and doing it quicker, because the world needs all these apps. So when we're thinking about composite analytical apps, frame for the audience, what are we thinking about and what are we doing about it?
So the goal we are trying to, the goal we have here is for anybody to be able to build a data-rich app easily and fast, right? Not just any kind of app, apps that bring together structured data and unstructured data. The three kinds of data that Robert talked about earlier, sort of to blend, search-based user experiences with analytics and slicing and dicing, and be able to do predictive analytics across all your data. That's all easy to say. It sounds like marketing speak, but in reality, it is really very hard to do. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of knowledge. It takes a lot of skill. It's more art than science. What we'd like to do is we'd like to simplify and standardize the way that these apps can be built, because that we believe will help speed up the process of doing that. And so as part of that, one of the things we are doing is we've started this initiative called the Haven App Framework. The idea here is to sort of formalize and standardize patterns of development of big data apps. containerize sort of the componentry involved, reference architecture, so that you can deploy an entire app in a push-button way, while encapsulating all the best practices that you might have in order to set things up, putting these things together. We also want to make sure that for people who are just new to big data or just getting started, we offer the benefit of the wealth of experience we've collected over the past 10 years in building apps together with our customers. And we are offering this concept of rapid deploy solutions. So these are things that think of them as jumpstart templates, as applications that we can build for you for specific use cases that we believe are fairly repeatable. Some examples you'll see on the show floor are voice of customer, which is what are my customers saying about me, about our products, about our brand. You'll see we built one of these for this conference that Colin mentioned earlier. But there are other ones like how to make cities smarter, public safety, detecting financial fraud, things like that. These are things that are fairly repeatable use cases that we believe should be easily deployable. So as part of that, we are offering as part of these rapid deploy solutions, we'll have starters, schemas, pre-configured data sources, as well as pre-configured visualizations that showcase some of the capabilities of Vertica and Idle, things that are advanced analytic capabilities that have always existed in these products, but might not have been known to you or might not have been, you didn't know how to use them. And so this gives you sort of the starting point that sort of accelerates development of these applications. And we hope and invite our partner community to work with us to build more of these templates, and so that we can really raise the bar in a manner of speaking for what an application looks like, what a big data application looks like. So Logi Analytics, who Colin mentioned, is partnering closely with us to provide some of the development infrastructure for this studio environment to build some of these visualizations and ultimately offer to a business user an end user customizable user interface. So a lot of these things are coming together. But again, this is a brand new initiative for us, and I invite you to be all cynical and skeptical and tell us what we miss and help us make it better.
Okay, well that sounds exciting. I mean, it sounds like we're taking our game to not just having the core technology, but looking at how are you going to get solutions to address this app challenge. I think Robert put up 1 trillion apps. How we're going to do that and how we're going to do it quickly. And that brings me to the next question. And Chris, I'd like to bring you into this, that, can we do it all ourselves? I think the answer is no. We gotta, it takes a village or some sort of tagline there. So
you're getting political again, but yes.
Well, it is the season, right? But so let's talk about, to achieve this goal of rapid deployment solutions, creating composite apps, how are we looking at this from an ecosystem, from a community perspective?
Right. Well, what it really does take is an ecosystem and community of partners. And, there's so many different types of partners that we work with, and HP is such a partner-centric, partner-friendly organization that it's been great to be able to make this investment in our ecosystem. Haven is really just the core. Despite what we put in, Idle, Vertica, our open source contributions, distributed our connectors, obviously our Hadoop partnerships as well. Without that ecosystem of data providers, there's so much that can be done now to enhance your analytics by, obtaining data not just from inside your organization, but it's social data, other types of data, and then data curation. The organizations, obviously Mike talked about what Tamer is doing to help make sense of all this data. Our ecosystem partners who add value, provide BI, visualization, security, all of these capabilities around our platform. And then, of course, our solution partners. And our solution partners that provide solutions in all these spaces, like Colin talked about, like the Google Trends showed. It's not just about big data anymore. It's about what we can do with big data and how we use big data to transform our business. Robert talked about the transformation areas. So we absolutely need a very vibrant, growing, expanding ecosystem in all of these spaces, and it really just sort of blossoms out from there. And for Haven to really be everywhere and for Haven to be successful, this ecosystem has to be successful and, of course, work with us together to make our customers successful, and then we'll all succeed.
Okay, so that sounds like we're taking where we're at now to the next level.
Absolutely.
As we build this out, and that involves a lot of people in this audience that can be part of the
almost
party.
Everybody. When we talk about developers, all of you are developers of one sort or another. Absolutely. Yes.
Well, and speaking of developers, Robert, in his keynote emphasized, it's really developers first, right? I mean, innovation is not coming from the C-level down, and then minions are executing and driving world domination. It sounds like it's reversed.
Yes.
And developers are driving what we're doing. Can we talk about developer-driven innovation and not just our vision for it, but what we're doing? Can you outline that for us?
I mean, it's pretty simple, but you know, the devil's in the details. Like Mike said, it was simple, and Shilpa said not so much. Same thing with developers, right? It's really about creating a seamless experience where there's a lot going on and there's a lot of parties involved. To engage developers at the front end, obviously build understanding of Haven, where we come together, where we work together, but then also to connect them with each other, and to allow them to connect with each other. So much of what developers are doing and what's being done, and obviously the open source community is a fantastic example of this, which is why we're so active with it, is the development community engaging with itself, not just with us, and then to be able to co-innovate, to bring the kinds of solutions to market, like these rapid deploy solutions, and engage our ecosystem and engage developers really anywhere and everywhere to make all of this work, and make it work for customers and make it work for businesses.
So it sounds like there's a lot of different ways to do it. And Shilpa, I know for some of our on-demand developer communities, we're revving our code and putting out releases at a cadence never seen before. It used to be months, and now we're talking weeks and in some cases days, right?
That's right. And some of these APIs that we are providing, we are offering preview APIs, and then some that we are hardening to make based on the feedback to turn into products. So you will see us do a wide variety of software form factors, so to speak, to deliver the different kinds of, to cater to the different audiences that we have.
Okay. Well, and speaking of that, I know we have a little special announcement today, so can you outline what did we announce as our little special parting gift for developers today?
Absolutely. So we announced, now again, developers come in all shapes and sizes, but certainly
and we love
many
them all.
of them, we showed you a bunch of logos of Facebook and Etsy and some of these great customers we have. The next Facebooks, the next Etsys, we really want to be able to support that part of the developer community as well. So we announced the Haven Startup Accelerator Program, which is basically our startup program. As was mentioned, I think Shilpa mentioned it, Colin mentioned it, others, we've had things like Vertica Community Edition, Idle on Demand. We've had free versions of our technology that we contribute, and obviously we're more and more contributing to and with the open source community. At the same time, those who are really trying to build production class big data applications and solutions sometimes need a bit more, either a bit more capacity, a bit more software, or live help and assistance and live support. So we've really created this program to help the startup community in particular, who may not quite have the financial resources to afford all of that, bridge to sort of that next level of building real production class, enterprise class big data apps and solutions. There's a little bit here up on the slide. Chris Bethos is actually showing it downstairs, so you can get a chance. And if you are a startup and you want to see if you qualify and apply, you can do it right downstairs as well. So we're really, really excited about this. We've been doing so much with emerging startups. Like Colin said, it's in our DNA. So, and obviously as Mike evidenced and others. So, and as we're evidencing up here, I mean, we've all been around here for a long time. We're really, really excited about, really helping the next generation of big data application solution companies bring their solutions to market and work with us as they do. So this is going to be a great, great program. So.
Well, that's huge. I mean, it sounds like it's about accessibility, and we are just opening the doors so companies, big, small, wherever they are, have a home, have a way to engage with us and start harnessing and taking advantage of our technology.
And making customers successful. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
And Shilpa, let me just ask you maybe for a final word. As you're thinking about the announcements we made today, and you're thinking about what you want this audience to take away as over the next 2.5 days that they learn more about it, what key things do you suggest they look for, that they kind of probe and find out about our technologies that we've done with all the new things we just announced?
Yeah. So again, a lot of you're going to get a preview of a lot of the excavator Vertica capabilities here today. So definitely go to the breakout sessions and learn as much as you can, and definitely give us feedback. Another very interesting thing that we do here, the reason we do this conference in Boston is because a lot of the Vertica engineering team is based in Boston. This year, though, there are people who have actually flown from lots of remote corners of the world to also who are part of our broader engineering team. And they're all in the developer lounge. So if you ever have any kind of technical questions, if you have anything you wanted to know but didn't know where to ask, you have developers from every part of our product portfolio here that you can talk to and find out more. Also, go check out the demo floor and look at some of the examples of composite analytic apps that we have built, and suggest more apps that we should offer as solutions, as rapid deploy solutions, or if you'd like to build some and offer it to your customers, if you're a partner, come and talk to us as well. We'd love to work with you on it.
Well, I think that's great. And in fact, just to echo that point, and what we're sharing on the screen there is a small sample of just some of the sessions, some of the experiences you'll have today that tie directly to some of the things we covered today. And this is just a subset of it. So over the next couple of days, you may want to make note of it. Obviously, you have your conference brochures that if you're interested in things you heard about, whether it's Kafka, of course the new Vertica release, the startup program, everything you heard about today, you're going to be able to get a lot more information.
Well, I'll say one more thing. The other thing that makes this conference special is the ability for customers to talk to other customers. Yes. So that is probably your best resource here at this conference is the community of Vertica and HP Big Data users. And so
the live community.
Definitely share your experiences, with our product as well as best practices. And so, take advantage. It's a very unique gathering of like-minded people.
Well, that's absolutely something we want to, and we create opportunities for. These are the world's brightest minds when it comes to data science and big data. We want you to connect, and we're going to do everything we can to support it. Well, with that, I'd like to thank you both. Can we give a round of applause for Chris and Shilpa? And we're going to do a little bit of a stage change here, I believe. And what I'd like to do now is something different. We just talked about technology. We talked about vision. I'd like to do something we haven't done at this conference before and talk not about technology on big data or computers on big data, column stores. We're going to spend the rest of the time talking about that. But I'd like to talk about maybe the most impressive computer, and that's the one sitting on your shoulders, your brain. Because if we think about it, your brain is processing and thinking about and analyzing big data every second, something we probably all, frankly, take for granted. And what I want to do now is introduce our next speaker, whose job and profession and passion is actually understanding big data and understanding your brain on big data. So I'd like to welcome up to the stage Poppy Crum, Senior Principal Scientist from Dolby Labs. And Poppy, I'll give this to you. And just a word on Poppy, and this was enough that a mere marketing person had to write it down. Poppy is the consulting professor. She's at Dolby Labs, of course, but a consulting professor at Stanford with a focus on symbolic systems in music, which we're going to hear about. And her focus is how the brain and technology can be enmeshed together and how you can actually harness both together and think about that. So let me turn it over to Poppy, and I think you're in for a treat. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm a computational systems neuroscientist by training and have a true belief that the intersection of science and technology is where great things are going to happen. How successful I am in the world as a computational organism is not dependent that my brain provides me an accurate representation of the data in the environment. Rather, what matters is that my experience of the world can get me to a robust and actionable state. Most often, this is not reality. So I like to say that we live in a state of illusion. We live in a state where reality is not the answer we strive for. Let me give you an example of what I mean when I say this. So here's a popular demonstration, but I think it captures much of... Sorry. First, I want you to watch his mouth very carefully, because I'm going to ask you what you hear.
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba.
All right. Now, everyone, when you watch that, what did you hear? You heard something maybe like, did it sound like tha, tha, tha? Tha, tha, tha. All right. So now I want you to watch it one more time. And this time, I'd like everyone to close their eyes. Promise me you will do this. And let's see what we hear.
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba.
All right, so was it a little bit different? Yes, slightly. So hopefully many of you experienced now ba, ba, ba. Okay, so what's going on? This is an example I really like to frame some of the ideas that I hope we all go away with, which is, here's an example where what he's actually saying, when you closed your eyes, you heard the truth of the world, which I'll call the veridical world, where the stimulus and what you experienced are one-to-one, which is ba, ba, ba. So he's saying ba, ba, ba. That is the auditory component. But we've overlaid that with him mouthing ga, ga, ga. Okay? And your brain's receiving incongruent information from what it sees and what it hears. And how does it solve the problem? Well, it doesn't give you anything right. You don't hear what's there. You don't see what's actually there. Instead, what you experience is an illusory percept, but of tha, tha, tha. In some cases, it's da, da, da. And that illusory percept is your brain's way of trying to get to an actionable, robust state. Because if you experience the accuracy of the data and the information in the world, most often that's going to lead you to many pathological conditions. That's what they actually do experience. Our success is built on this illusion. And I'll tell you that this particular experience is highly dependent on our priors. It's highly dependent on our expectations and what exposures we've had prior to coming into this example. If you go to a different language, dependent on what your language you've grown up with, there's different expectations for your exposure, for your voiced syllables, and what components of speech go into it. And that's going to influence probabilistically how your brain integrates these components. I know Jeff was talking about composite analytical applications, and that's a similar concept to what we're talking about here, how we integrate information and how we weight what's relevant and what's not. So let's watch it one more time, and this time I want you to close your eyes and open your eyes and experience how much control you have over your perception of the world.
Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba. Ba, ba, ba.
All right. So much as I say, priors and probabilistic expectation drive this. How our brains have evolved to deal with this big data problem is to develop a non-veridical optimized experience. We have certain things that matter, that robust actionable state. We need to be able to get away from the tiger or whatever that tiger may be in the current world. We also need to be able to find our crying baby. Those evolutionary pressures drive how we experience things. We have to be robust in action and efficient. Now, before I go to this, you're going to see a ball falling. But what I want you all to do initially is focus on the blue dot that should be off and to your right. Okay? So promise me a look there. And I'm going to ask you what you see when you're focusing on the blue dot. Okay. So everyone's focused on the blue dot. You should see a falling dot. Does that dot appear to fall sort of and veer off into the right? Yes. Okay. Now I want you to take your foveal vision and your gaze and direct it to where the ball is falling. All right. This is a simple illusion, but it illustrates a few things. So one, this illusion is often used to describe what happens in a curveball. Curveballs really do curve, but often batters describe what's called a break. And a break happens when changing from your foveal to when there's a change from where an object is, whether it's in your foveal vision to your peripheral vision, and how it goes back and forth. In this case, when you're focused on the blue dot, the falling ball is in your periphery. Okay, it's in your peripheral vision. You have a conflict between what we'll call local and global motion. The local motion being, you see this sort of gradient pattern on the ball that's moving at a particular spatial frequency. But when I'm focused on the blue dot, I also have the ball that's falling, and that's the global motion. When that ball's in my periphery, the global and local motion are interacting with each other and causing this sort of oblique misrepresentation of the spatial location. But now when I focus on the ball as it falls, it's in my foveal vision, and I can disentangle. I can separate the conflicts between local and global motion. This is an example where I really want you to recognize, okay, this happens every day in the world. We always have these types of conflicts. This is always present. Here's another example where I think we'll take it to another level. And if you focus on the white dot, okay, I'm going to have you watch this twice. First, I want everyone focused on just the white dot, and I'm going to ask you what you see. All right, so I think most of you saw a lot of high-frequency spatial color change on the torus, right? And then as it started to move, did that high-frequency change continue? Or did it seem to become more static and you saw the global motion of the... Yes, okay. So now, you can guess what I'm going to ask you to do. I'd like you to focus on one of the sides of the ring, okay? And this time, tell me what you see. So what changed? The high frequency, did everyone experience that? When you focus on the ring, I'll play it one more time while I'm talking, you can switch between focusing on the center and focusing on the edges. So when you're focused, when your gaze and you're foveated on the center white dot, as the ring starts to move, as the torus starts to move, you lose the ability to track the fine change of the colors. But when you focus to the side of the ring, suddenly that change, it's apparent that that's been there all the time. It never went away. It's just what's relevant to your system, right? This is what matters. These are examples where context, our priors, our expectations drive how our brain knows what's relevant, drive how our brain knows how to emphasize, what to emphasize and what not to. This is an example where when I'm focused on the center, you can exploit these types of ideas. I mean, the local and global motion, when I'm focused on the center dot, the information about color change once the global motion starts is completely lost. So you can imagine situations, both how to exploit this. A lot of current VR devices consider gaze-directed data optimization, data reduction, and compression. These are perceptual. There's no reason we have to code information if we aren't experiencing it. But then you can also think of situations that are quite terrifying. Now that you know this, every time you think about a pilot and in a complex world where they're having to navigate and deal with a lot of different types of information, and you know that in their peripheral vision, they really aren't experiencing the truth of the world, it's pretty scary, right? But obviously, systems develop ways of compensating for where these types of errors happen. But the primary key is to know they do, right? Where we have power is to understand, how our system gets things wrong. Because if we understand where things go wrong, and we know what's most important to the system, we know what's key to getting us to an actionable, robust state, we also know where the system's malleable. Illusions aren't just parlor tricks in these demonstrations. I don't like to call them illusions. They're not parlor tricks that we exploit. They're things that happen every day in the world. And as a computational scientist or a data scientist, these are ways to gain insights to how systems are malleable and how a very, very intelligent system, our brain, is able to take this hugely complex world and make sense of it and make it efficient. And we can gain a lot from understanding those components and understanding how that output, how to drive that output. So much of the world that we think about, we want to understand sensory processing, but then we want to take it to a next level. We want to be able to, if we understand these malleabilities, we can get to a state where we want to enhance things. We want to augment our experience of the world. In many cases, we can look to species-specific evolutionary pressure can drive sensory plasticity. What our computational limits as a human may be completely modified and augmented in other sensory systems due to predatory prey pressures. You put evolutionary pressure on a system and you can find neural systems that are able to experience the world and deal with computational complexities that are far beyond what we would predict. How do we do? Okay, so we can look at animals that are able to do this, and we can talk about a lot of different species, but how can we leverage that kind of pressure in environment today? So one of the things I think about a lot is plasticity. And as a neurophysiologist or computational data scientist, plasticity in technology shows up in one place that I think is really relevant to this group in terms of thinking about big data, which is the gaming environment. So we have a course, I teach a course at Stanford that I started called Neuroplasticity in Video Gaming. And the intent of this is that we can use the gaming environment to really target and modify these neural circuits. We know that the brain is augmenting and enhancing certain parts of information and pulling information out and reducing other information. Given the context, given my priors, the same piece of information is experienced and interpreted very differently from one individual to another. We can take advantage of this in different environments to create situations where we can enhance learning. We can find new basis sets of perceptual learning to really drive a very different experience. So let me give you an example. I mean, people often talk about gaming as you're learning a local skill, or there's a lot of morality we're not talking about, which is you can use gaming for social change. But what I'm really talking about here is fundamentally changing the neural experience, changing the neural circuit, changing how I experience the world through a gaming platform, which here are 3 examples. There's quite a bit of data show. If I take 3 different subject groups, I take a group that they're all going to play Call of Duty for a number of hours. We take a group of gamers that have been playing for a number of years. We take a group that's they're going to play a different game. Say they play The Sims, something that doesn't require a lot of action, a lot of foveated visual acuity. And we take another group that's never identified themselves as gamers, and we train them for, say, 48 hours across a 2-week period. So what we find out is that the group of gamers and the group that was trained in, say, playing an action game like Call of Duty for a number of hours fundamentally sees the world differently after doing this. It's not that they see the world differently in relation to Call of Duty. They have fundamentally changed this on the left is a Gabor pattern. It's a way that we often measure contrast sensitivity in the world, visual acuity, low-level visual processing. Intense exposure in a controlled environment to particular types of stimuli can modify how someone experiences the world at the lowest components of sensory integration. So here you have the ability to take exposure, and you can also train many other things, but you can train fundamental visual acuity. You can train sensitivity to how we hear. You can modify reaction times. I work with a lot of athletes who develop games to change how responsive they are, maybe for their particular sport, but often extended beyond to try to develop, again, skills and perceptual learning that carry over to many extrapolated contexts. So I like to say that this is a way that we can optimize the environment and create a system of feedback that allows us to maximize the neural circuits. We're at a state where we have pretty good ideas about how the neural circuits and how our perceptual system is enhancing and reducing information. So now we can take that and leverage it in a controlled platform, in controlled environments, to really pull this type of information out. And I think for big data, for data scientists, this is a really engaging problem, because it's not just the gaming platform, but it's also how we create these feedback loops for experience. Finally, if we think about, we've said we want to understand the perceptual system, we want to enhance it, then we also want to leverage it to build technology. This is the space that I spend a lot of my time in. I'll give you an example. There are a few things that to do this, to actually be able to create technologies in a world where we really are engaging and enhancing the system and not just saying that we are, the first thing we have to be able to do is to tap into and exploit the physiological processes of the system. So you're looking at a picture of a lot of fire and some thermal imaging. This is an example. Today, most standard definition, high definition displays produce about what we call as 350 candelas per square meter in brightness. One of the technologies at Dolby that we've just come out with recently is actually high dynamic range displays. So high dynamic range displays can produce up to, say, 8,000, 10,000 candelas per square meter, not in the market right now, but you're talking about a much brighter representation in luminance. Here, these subjects are watching content. They're watching content of fire. And what's happening to them when they watch this fire is when the flame appears on the screen and appears to come out to them, we're able to measure regions of interest on their faces that show that their body, just based on the luminance that's reaching their retina, is starting to expel heat. Okay, so we're actually measuring temperature changes on their face. And this is, this tells us a lot. You don't see the same thing with a standard definition display. You see this only when you get to technology that tricks the system, or technology that engages the sensory system in the same way that you would in a natural world. This also tells us something about how we engage the natural world in terms of the probabilistic nature of how our experiences, our neural system deals with our behavioral experiences. When we approach fire in a natural environment, we don't have to feel it to begin reacting to it. Just based on our expectation, our knowledge of the fact it's flame, and how bright it is reaching my retina, my body's going to start doing what it does best to optimize and enhance how I'm going to interact with that stimulus. And when you start recognizing that from a technological point of view, being able to engage these systems is critical to some of the future that we want to get to. Now, everyone here many of you are data scientists. We see data. We always want to figure out what it is. So I'll tell you, what do you see here? You see a lot of little blips. You see trends that are consistent, right? So this is a measure of galvanic skin response, basically the electrical activity of your skin, one of the easiest sensors to capture information from individuals. And all you're measuring here is the changes in your sweat as a function of some stimulus. Well, this is a 25-year-old watching 2 different soccer games and looking at, all they're seeing is penalty kicks, right? We're able to track very predictive every penalty kick, both you see a common trend. I can tell you that relevance and emotional attachment is not key here. I think it was probably 3 or 4 when the players from 1994 were around. But you've got key changes in the physiological system that are consistent, predictive. They're predictive across many different types of content. So when we think about perception, physiological states, these are things we can predict. The closed-loop feedback system is critical because the physiological state, these are things we can be tracking in a closed loop to create adaptive technologies of the future. And finally, as we think about perceptual systems, we're in a state where we know we can maximize information capacity. We can give systems more data. I would like to say that more data is not better, necessarily. Most often, it's all about how we take that more data and we restructure it, and we know what to emphasize and we know what to change and how we use it. But again, my efficiency in the world as a human, as a computational human, is completely dependent on, because I'm a capacity-limited system, on how I emphasize and get rid of information. And I want to augment, as we go forward, we can augment that in more relevant ways. We have the capacity to have 10x magnification in a contact lens. We can easily create 4x magnification in the strength of my arm. As we think about bionic workplaces or workplaces that where we want to increase efficiency, augment how much information, our capacity load in the auditory space, virtual reality and augmented reality, these are places where we have so much capability and so much promise, but we haven't gotten near anything that's going to be accepted by a consumer or a user, partly because of the disconnect between how we take information in, how we exploit the limitations of the human system, and these modifications and transformations that happen, and integrate these with an augmented or virtual world. The augmented reality problem is a very difficult one. It's one where we have to understand the real world and overlay augmentation on top of that, whereas in the virtual world, we can create whatever world we want. We need to make sure these systems integrate, and we need to leverage them. But as far as information capacity, representations where we take all the information we can get and display them to the visual image are going against the human system, when the human system and the brain's role is to get rid of information and to help us pull things out. Part of our role as data scientists to touch these worlds is going to be to do this in the most intelligent and appropriate ways. So the last demonstration I want to show you, past thinking about how we increase environmental awareness and sensory feedback, again, closed-looped information, one size fits all, is a thing of the past. We have to be going forward to having data systems that optimize to the individual and to the use case. The probabilistic nature of how we experience the world means that it's very malleable. Our experiences are very malleable. So as developers and technologists and people that think about data, one of the places where I think you have to have the most power is when there's ambiguity in the system. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. When there's ambiguity in the system, that's where we know the system can be malleable. And we know that as a human system, that the system wants to come to an answer. We never like to be in a state where we don't know how to interact or how to act on the data. So I'll leave you with this example. And I want you to first listen to what I play. And this is what I call, it's a situation of ambiguity. Now, how many people are familiar with this? How many people know that tune? Good, okay. Some of my classes, I get very few hands, which is often scary. All right, now, how many people know what I'm going to do next? Okay, good, even better. Okay, so let's play it backwards, because we want to create ambiguity in the system, okay? I'm going to give the system something it doesn't really know what to deal with. And I want you to listen to what you hear here, but also I know sometimes you might have heard that you can hear sort of subtle messages in maybe the Beatles or Led Zeppelin when played backwards, but let's see if we do. Riveting? No? A lot of? Everyone can transcribe and tell me what you heard? No? All right, so I've created ambiguity here, or we've created ambiguity together. Let's use the power of the human system to want to resolve information we don't know where to put it. So we'll bias it. We'll use our visual system to bias our auditory system in this case. I'm just going to point you in a little direction. So I'll leave you with this. The goal should not be to build the brain, to mimic the brain. We know that flight doesn't require feathers or a beak, but it's to understand the neural building blocks and understand the output, because the output, regardless of whether it's a brain or any other data system, is being used by a human. And we need to optimize efficiency, know how those components go together, and know what's relevant. We can exploit malleability, we can exploit redundancy, but then we need to leverage the probabilistic nature to drive the experience, because we have a huge amount of power in that if we understand the malleability and flexibility of the systems. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Another round of applause for Poppy. Was that cool? Was that cool? That is your brain on big data. That's my brain on big data. Now, tomorrow we'll be playing Britney Spears backwards. Okay? If this was disturbing in any way, you know, I want you to get grounded tonight. Be prepared for the experience. Okay? Because it just sets the stage. But this gives you, I hope, this drives you to think about the power of data, the challenges of data, the opportunities with data, and even the risks with data, and what can be done here. And you experienced yourself. So as you're thinking about your areas of projects and focus, it gives you just a sense of how we're just beginning. I want to share a few notes with you just to give you some key points as you venture out on the journey you're about to go through. Because you're just starting, okay? This is just the start. Today is a riveting amount of activity for you, and you choose where to go, you choose where to engage. And it's distributed across this venue in this hotel. Everything's in the hotel, but you will be going up and down escalators and stimulating your mind and getting a little bit of physical activity too. So everything is on this level or the level above us. In particular, lunch is in the Marina Ballroom, and that's off of the lobby level. And of course, tomorrow we're going to be meeting here at the same time that we did today. A couple other key points is, especially for the Heritage alumni, this is really a call out to you. This is the HP Big Data Conference. And we certainly talked a lot about Vertica, and that is an absolutely core focus, and I hope you took that away. But as you can see now, we are going broader and deeper. What you see here is a list of the 10 tracks that group and categorize for you the sessions. They go from cutting-edge technology to real-world use cases, every one not delivered by a marketing person. Applause on that. On a serious note, every one of these sessions is delivered by an engineer from HP, and often and usually by a real-world engineer from one of our customers or partners. So all these sessions are technical, they're all real, and they're all engaging. My call out to you is explore. Go to areas where you want to go deeper into your area of specialty, but pick at least a couple that, just like the experience we had now, are going to take you outside your comfort zone to learn something new as you look at these over 40 dynamic sessions. A request. This conference is the best conference you'll ever be at this year, but we want it to be even better next year. And to do that, and the only way to do that is get your feedback. We honestly read it, we looked at it, we made changes to this conference. That's a sincere promise. So my one request is, as you go to these sessions and engage, is to complete that survey. It only takes a minute or two. We will act on the information. And as an incentive, many of you are going to win some Hewlett Packard laptops that you can take away with you there. So that's a little bit of an incentive to give that feedback. And then finally, what I want to conclude with is a thank you. So on a sincere note, we couldn't be successful as a business. We could not be successful delivering the vision and the ecosystem solutions we're doing without the sponsors. They make a huge commitment to come here, and they're bringing information that I know you'll appreciate and that will engage you. You'll see them in the solution showcase. You'll see them in the sessions. Please make it a priority to engage with them. We pick them very selectively, and I know they'll be worth your while. So with that, I want to thank you for at the beginning of day one of the conference. If you've enjoyed the show so far, you're in for an absolute treat, and I'll see you tomorrow morning on the same stage. Thank you very much.